Welcome to the channel. Thank you everyone for tuning in. Today we are looking at the Yema Navygraf GMT. It's powered by Yema's in-house 3000 GMT caliber, and for those that didn't know that if they do their own calibers or not, well, yes they do. They started back in 2011 and they have a total of, well, definitely three which are their own and in-house, and they've got one which seems like a collaboration, so let's call it four in total. But no doubt they're probably based on older ETA designs for the most part, as most Swiss made foreheads movements are. Now, there was something special about this watch which attracted me to it. Initially, it was the colorway on offer, the nautical blue-white theme with those yellow accented hands. But on close inspection, the top hat sapphire, the sapphire bezel insert, and the vintage styling also stood out and made it a very good option for me to review. So, having previously reviewed their Superman 41mm, I reached out to Yema and they obliged and sent me this prototype model over for me to check out. Now, the issue I had with the Superman 41mm was that it was just too large for my wrist. I've noticed quite a few vintage style watches offer disproportionate lug to lug dimensions in comparison to the case diameter, which leaves them a little too long for my 6.5 inch wrist. So I was quite pleased when this model came in with much smaller dimensions, and bearing in mind I'm used to more proportionate and better fitting Seiko watches. So dimensions of this are as follows. You do have a 39mm case with a 14mm thickness, a 46mm lug to lug, which is true because you've got female end links, and a 19mm lug width with an overall weight of 140 grams. These dimensions, I believe, are perfectly proportioned, and the watch also fits my wrist amazingly well. Now, what I also like about Yema is that they remind me of a vintage car which has been retrofitted with modern tech. So it gives you a great balance between vintage looks and modern specifications. Now, I believe this is what Yema offers. And I want to keep this theme throughout because there's so many features that I will mention that have that balance between, that vintage styling and the modernization with the specifications. Now the case bracelet are fully brushed with a satin grain in varying directions across the case, vertical on the bracelet. Now this makes the watch feel very smooth in hand and it fits nicely with that vintage tool watch aesthetic. Now the case is defined perfectly, polished bevels around the sides, highlighting the case profile, and it has a very distinct defined bevel edge, specifically on one side of the watch, which is on the side of the crown, and it really does show off the side profile of the lugs and the whole case. And that's a really nice touch, distinguishing it from one side to the other. Both the crown and the caseback are signed with Yema's anchor logo. Now the caseback is particularly well machined and there isn't a single point of sharpness throughout the whole case or bracelet. The links themselves are solid H links with an exaggerated vintage taper of 20mm down to 16. Now the clasp has milled internals but a pull apart clasp with 4 micro adjustments. Now perfectly demonstrating my point of that balance between vintage and modern. Now this is a recurring theme throughout all the elements, so as I said, keep that in mind. Now, the dial is inspired by the Navygraf 2 from the 70s and it is packed with Yema's trademark features that applied unique hour markers, which are kind of similar to a maxi dial. However, they do differ enough with those double indexes at the 12, 6, and 9. The rest of the dial is printed, including the logos and text lines and the minute track along with the frame date window. I like the use of font they've used. I also like that yellow text below the Yema displaying the Navygraf name. It's scripted and it matches the sharp yellow seconds hand and that skeletonized GMT hand, which itself is actually bicolored. You've got half blue and then half yellow. And the blue end does blend in nicely into the background with only the arrow tip visible. Now, one thing I would say about the dial is that the hands are a bit plain for me. I would have liked to see some more micro detailing possibly, just beyond that simple polishing, especially at this price point, and for them to stand out a little bit more. Now the box sapphire was a great choice because it gives that vintage acrylic look with the hardness of sapphire, and the bezel is surprising. It's actually 120 click bi-directional bezel, which I'm sure there are others like this, but this is the first time I've experienced this. Very reasonable rotation, it's quite tactile and overall quite smooth. Now when I first had this, they were quite harsh, but after a week of using the bezel, it's worn in very nicely. And you also get the 3 times on potential with this 24-hour bezel. Now they've also used a fully loomed sapphire insert, which I absolutely love, and so will all the loom lovers out there. There's plenty of loom on the dial and the bezel, and it lights up really well through the night. Very solid, well applied lume throughout, and it does look fantastic. Now on wrist, due to those dimensions, it is really well balanced and looks very proportionate with no elongated lugs. It fits perfectly on my 6.5-inch wrist, and it's been an absolute pleasure to wear this on a daily basis, genuinely. This has lots of elements which make it a perfect daily beater, all for around £1,000 retail. Now that means to determine its value rating, we have to put it up against brands like Christopher Ward, Certina, Squale, Davosa, just to name a few. So it isn't as well finished as the Christopher Ward, but it definitely stands out in character amongst the others. It's a good contender. It also does enough to stand out enough, and it stays within its own unique design language, right? It does stick out. It's not trying to copy everybody else, whereas some of the other brands like Davosa, Squale, they do homage plenty of other watches out there, and this one does have, I think, enough to stand by itself in that quite packed category. So on this, let me know your thoughts. Let me know below, and also thank you to Yema for letting me review this watch. And as always, thank you everybody for watching, and I will see you on the next video. Bye for now.